Did you see those points last night? Defense scored 35 points. That's a crazy number. Mine.
The Ravens against me for the shutout.
How are you doing?
Is that how they got that? Our one league is he scored a touchdown.
Sorry, you can't.
All right, thank you. There's a cat ingredient piece that we'll have.
Pizza.
All right.
Is it local?
All right, well, let's go ahead and get going so we can hopefully get everyone out of here on time or maybe a little early. On a beautiful Friday afternoon. Thank you all for coming to our final regional state plan overview meeting. For those of you that do not know me, my name is Brian Shepard. I'm the COO of the State Broadband Office within OIT, and I'm also the single point of contact for the FirstNet initiative. Before I start, hopefully everyone is well aware what the FirstNet initiative is. Hopefully one of you guys have been at one of our meetings the last 5 years. Everyone aware what the FirstNet initiative is overall, so we can kind of just jump into it. Excellent, right on. So what we're going to do today is really kind of go over the state plan at a very high level. We'll kind of get into a few of the key elements and then talk through how you guys can get some more information online about it and what the feedback process is. So before we get going, why don't we go ahead? We've got a reasonable sized group, so let's go ahead and do some quick introductions. So everyone's aware of who's who within the room. So start that.
Ed Mills with OIT. I'm on Brian's staff, and we have on the line right now, we have Riley Brazee, which is with the state of Colorado, and Jeremy Burkhardt from Lamar Fire.
Ed Martinez, IT Director for Pueblo County. David Lucero, I'm the Law Enforcement Bureau Chief for the Pueblo County Sheriff's Office.
Good morning. I'm Tracy Murdoch, and I'm with FirstNet, and I represent Colorado to make sure that we're getting your voices heard. And I've been working for about 2 years with Brian and his team, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Marcos Lucero, no relation to David. AT&T FirstNet state outreach team. But we may be by the end of the meeting.
Dave Kerr from Hanover Fire, just north of here.
Good morning, I'm Lisa Shorter, the 911 manager for Pueblo County Sheriff's Office.
Ray Ecker, Regional Manager for the Colorado State Patrol.
Don Nacarado, State Patrol Communication Director and member of the FirstNet board.
Tracy Swearingen, Captain with the Sheriff's Office, the Emergency Services Bureau.
David Bitwar, I'm with the Colorado Division of Fire Prevention and Control. I'm in the wildland fire section.
I'm Timmy Aguilar with AT&T Public Affairs.
Jeff Reynolds, I'm the Radio Systems Coordinator, Pueblo County Sheriff's Office, Emergency Services Bureau.
Chris Riley, I'm with FirstNet, but I'm formerly the fire chief here in Pueblo for about 7 years, and I'm glad to be back in Pueblo. Good to see everybody.
Steve Leander, Pike State Regional Communications Network.
I'm Sean Shelton, Fire Chief, City of Pueblo.
And I'm Sarah Smith. I'm on Brian's team. I'm the project coordinator.
And then we also have just joined Christina Martinez that's online.
So, as I mentioned, what our objective is today is to give a very high-level overview of the final state plan and kind of where we're at in the process and what the next couple months is going to hold for the decision process for the FirstNet initiative. The information we're going to go over is the publicly available information. There is a private portal that you can get access to get much more detailed information. Unfortunately, we can't talk through that information because it's proprietary, so you have to have access through that private portal in order for us to share that. So not knowing if everyone has that or not, we're going to use the publicly available information. But as I mentioned, really encourage you to go through that private portal. All you need to do is get us an email with your name, your jurisdiction, and your email address. We'll put that on FirstNet, and then usually within a day or two, you'll have your credentials to log into that website. So Yeah, this is basically saying that everything we're going to go over today is public information, and can be found on the FirstNet.com website or other public sources. So, where we're at in the process, our final state plan was delivered to us by FirstNet on September 19th. We did receive a draft state plan on June 19th. We had 45 days to go through that. We went out, we had feedback from across the state. We had over 150 comments submitted to us on the state plan. You know, this part's great, this part I don't like, this is where I want to see this part go. We sent that information back to FirstNet and AT&T. They then took 45 days to kind of integrate that and modify the state plan, and then presented us with our final state plan on September 19th. And that did not start the 90-day shot clock because there was one piece of information that was missing. That was the federal funding level. If the state chooses to opt out, the NTIA is responsible for that, so they were a bit delayed in getting us that. So we got that funding level, which we'll go over on September 28th. So therefore, the shot clock, the 90-day shot clock that's in the statute started September 29th. So we have until December 28th to make our final decision as a state whether we're going to opt in or opt out. I can't speak for the governor, but I don't think he wants to deal with this over Christmas. So I'd be willing to bet that our final decision is probably going to come sometime in mid-December. We've been in contact with the governor. He's aware of the process, working through our governing body, which, as Don mentioned, Don's a member of our governing body. We'll talk through that in a minute. But he's very interested in getting feedback from that group that's been involved with this for the last 5 years or 4 years, I guess it is. So what we're doing right now is, as I mentioned, this is the last regional meeting. We were in Rifle, Fort Worth, South Fork, Denver, and now Pueblo. We did a webinar as well. So this is our sixth and final of these kind of overview meetings that we're having to give you folks a chance to understand kind of where it's at, where are some of the key issues, and then give you the opportunity to go into that private portal, review it, and then give your feedback to the governing body. And intervention to the governor. So that's kind of where we're at right now, is trying to get everyone on board and get the feedback process going. And then we'll use November to kind of go through both scenarios, get all the feedback. We'll be having several meetings with our governing body to kind of talk through that, and figure out what we're going to do, and provide an ultimate recommendation to the governor, sometime in November. Again, the governor has the final choice. The governor doesn't have to go with the governing body's recommendations, but as I mentioned, he's very interested in hearing from that governing body. So what we're going to do, again, focus on public information. We're going to talk through some of the key issues here: pricing, coverage. Those are kind of two of the big issues we've heard from folks as part of the state plan. We're also going to talk through, the opt-out option, where we're at with that. So essentially, what is the opt-in solution? So if we opt into the network, basically what we're doing if we opt in is we're utilizing AT&T's existing network. So in addition to what they currently offer, one of the key elements of the solution is going to be what's called a dedicated Evolved Packet Core. Think of the Evolved Packet Core as the brains of a cellular network. It's what determines who goes where, who goes what, who gets what kind of bandwidth, how the network works. And so right now, if you're using AT&T for your public safety communications, you're just part of their consumer core. So they have one core that basically runs everyone, whether you're public safety or Joe Blow on the streets watching cat videos, everyone's kind of on that same core. What AT&T has stated is they're going to create a second core for just public safety and just for the FirstNet network. And what that does is that allows them to do things on that core that they won't be doing on their commercial core. So for example, the prioritization and preemption, the ability to give you as public safety users prioritization on their network at all times. That's what this core will do, is allow them to do that. The security aspects. There'll obviously be many more security aspects on the public safety core than is on their commercial core. So really what it's doing is just kind of taking their network and saying, okay, we're going to put a piece over here that's going to allow public safety all the things that they need in terms of security and prioritization and preemption and some application functionality that our normal customers won't have. So that's really what we're looking at, is building the network on their existing foundation with what they have. They will be using regional carriers as well. There's three primary regional carriers in the state. Regional carriers. Think of people not the big four, so not Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, or Sprint. People like Viero is a regional carrier. So we have three regional carriers in our state: Viero, Union Wireless, and ComNet. AT&T is in discussions with all three of those folks to be part of this effort. So in addition to their own network, they're looking to bring on roaming partners to fill in holes that they don't have that other folks do. For example, on the Eastern Plains, Viero is one of the primary providers for cellular coverage. So they're working with Bureau to say, okay, let's not replicate things, let's work together on that. So that will be part of the network as well. And then in terms of devices, you've seen us bring around the phone devices to a lot of our discussions. You've probably seen, a lot of folks are doing some new things with ruggedized iPads or tablets. Some of the new radios you can get will do both LMR and LTE. So as you look at devices, the elements that are going to have in the FirstNet system is you'll be able to have increased access to some of the new devices that are coming on board. You've never seen, the man pack type stuff where you can put a little cube in your backpack and basically use it as a network extender. A lot of really cool stuff going on in the device space. So you'll see a lot more new devices. I think what Vidian had one that we've been looking at. So there's really cool stuff going on. So you'll have access to all of that as well. All right, so coverage. One of the big things that we've heard, in our state obviously is coverage. We have some unique challenges in our state with coverage, and I don't think there's any one given provider that does it perfectly in our state, given the geography of our state. What we want to do is really focus on that. So what, all the bells and whistles don't mean anything. Like you can't get coverage. That's kind of the foundational element. If we don't have coverage, nothing else works. So where is our coverage? Where is AT&T good? Where are they not good? Let's work through that. So what we did is kind of we've been working with AT&T for a while on figuring out what is coverage. Where is coverage? Where are you guys strong? Where are you not strong? Where are some key gaps? That type of thing. So what we're going to do is kind of go through these public maps. Again, there's much more detailed maps in the private portal. They actually have maps for year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5 of this process. So again, if we choose to opt in, then you can look at what the coverage progression is going to be and where you see some significant jumps. So again, really encourage you to go through that. So what we wanted to start with was every telecommunications carrier has to submit forms twice a year to the FCC. That's okay, where's our coverage? What it is, we pulled this to say, as of the end of 2016, what did coverage look like in our state? So on this, you'll see this bluish element, and I'm colorblind by the way, so don't make fun of me. This bluish area is AT&T's LTE coverage in our state. This greenish color is AT&T's non-LTE, so 2G, 3G in our state. The grayish color over there is roaming partners of AT&T that have LTE, and kind of the brownish color is roaming partners that in 2G and 3G. So you can kind of see what the coverage looks like as of December 2016 in our state. So this is what's on the public portal. So this is what AT&T is saying. This is what coverage will look like in your state at the end of 2017. So basically within the next couple months, this is what coverage will look like. So what you can see is there's not a whole lot more coverage. It's basically a lot more LTE. So what AT&T is stating is that that's what one of their goals for this year has been to increase the amount of LTE throughout the states. So that's what we see. Is you see a lot of the areas that were 2G and 3G are now LTE. There is some additional coverage as well. There's still some holes, mostly in the western slope, in the mountainous areas. But you can see kind of that shift towards mostly going to LTE. So this is the southern region. You can see it, you can't see that. So it's kind of south centers of El Paso County, down through Pueblo, and on both sides of you guys. So this is what, based on the 2016 reports to the FCC, this is what coverage looked like in your area. And this is what AT&T is stating by the end of 2017 coverage will look like in this area as well. So again, you can see pretty similar coverage. A few things filled in, but a lot more LTE. So that's really kind of what we're saying is this starting point. So for the LTE, for the AT&T solution, our starting point is basically looking like this. So what we did is we had the availability through the state patrol to access their trunk mounted modem devices. The state patrol uses both AT&T and Verizon. So what we did is we pulled some data from them that shows where coverage is good and where coverage is not good. So basically, we can pull data out of that modem that tracks the cellular connection when they're connected. And so when you look at this map, this is data from the State Patrol starting in January 2017 up through about August of this year is when we did a lot of that data pull. And essentially what you're looking at is the green color is good. So the green color means, yep, we have really good coverage. The purple color means we either have poor coverage or no coverage, essentially. So this is what, based on the State Patrol, we looked at. You can see areas, mostly the metropolitan area along the corridor, corridors looks pretty good. Once you start to get into some of the valleys, the mountainous areas, we're starting to see coverages and price good there. So if you overlay that on the map, this is what you get. This is AT&T 2017 coverage map. This is what you get when you overlay the data we have from state control with their coverage. So again, what we're starting to see is where there is strong LTE, we're kind of seeing in a lot of places that we're seeing good coverage. Where there's not strong LTE, we're starting to see potentially not as much coverage. Can you see that really well?
Yeah, it's better.
Is that better? Okay, sorry about that. A lot of colors going on. So then this is basically kind of what that overlay what we think patrol data. So what we also did is we did some in-vehicle testing. We basically said, one of the common applications is a first responder driving in their vehicle with a cell phone, talking on it. So we took some devices and put them in vehicles as we were driving around the state doing outreach and so forth, with basically the same kind of application that holds the cellular information off the device, and then we mapped it out. So you can see here, same kind of thing. Green is good connectivity. Purple is poor, no connectivity. So again, you can see the areas where we saw poor connectivity, kind of in the valleys and in the mountainous areas. We did the same thing here. We overlaid what the connectivity for the NS17 looks like based on our drive test. And again, we can kind of see here areas where there's not strong LTE are the areas where we're saying we're not getting good connectivity throughout there in your areas. So the same thing. So this is what our drive testing in this area of this region looks like. You can see we did a lot of drive testing kind of in Custer County and up in that area. We had some varying results there. We did some testing over here out Eastern Plain, and had some varying results there. Overlay with the coverage map. This is what you can kind of see. So basically, there are some gaps that we've identified where we said, hey, what you guys are saying, where coverage is, we're not seeing that performance there with the network. Okay, this is another look of individual testing. Yeah, it's like, so at the end of it, what we looked at was, kind of where is, saying, okay, what we're seeing is where there's strong LTE, we're getting some good results, but where there's not, that's the problem areas we're seeing. So based on the 2016 reports, in this, for our state, there was 48% LTE coverage. What AT&T is saying by the end of 2017, there's going to be 74% LTE coverage in this area, in this region. We started out with 60%, and it will go up to 92% connectivity. If you throw in the roaming partners that we have, here's numbers for the roaming partners for that. So that was kind of our effort to look at and identify connectivity throughout the states based on what we had publicly available. As I mentioned, there's a lot more detailed maps and probably looking at stepping through what things are going to look like in the future. And what we tried to do was get a level set of where we're at today. So given that, we then went through, and this just has, I'm not going to, you can't really read that, but when we send the deck out, you can kind of see what the percentages are for each county in your region.
Could you go back one slide?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, we went through real quick. So what's, for our region, what's the total coverage? It's 92.4?
Yeah, so AT&T is stating that for LTE, that in the South region here, by the end of 2017, you will have 92% of the geography covered with LTE and 99.7% of the population covered.
That's based on those studies that from State Patrol and.
No, that's based on that's just based on what AT&T is stating will be available at the end of the year. So our drive test was just to kind of validate what they're stating that at. So think of those maps. Think of these maps.
So is that assuming that they get the contract, or is that what their plans are?
No. So this map here, and then we'll go into your region. So this map here. So what we did. So this map here is based on what AT&T filed with the FCC. The coverage looks like in your region at the end of 2016. So I think January 1st, 2017. This is what coverage looked like in your region according to the files with the FCC. This is what AT&T is stating coverage will look like in this region at the end of 2017, no matter what. So basically, we're trying to create a baseline. Where are we starting from with the coverage? So what AT&T is stating is that they have spent most of this year working to upgrade their existing infrastructure to LTE to increase the amount of LTE coverage. So that's, like I mentioned, that's what we're seeing here is all of this greenish color that was 2G and 3G. What they're stating is this is what it's going to look like at the end of this year, no matter what.
So based on where we are 1st of November, they should be pretty close to that. Is there any confirmation?
So the closest, I mean, this was our attempt at confirmation, as I mentioned. We pulled the data as of August. The end of August was the last data pull that we did. Maybe it was September, I can't remember. So when we look at, where we at here? So CSP, yeah, so CSP coverage, yeah, so with the CSP coverage, this data is going to be anywhere from January through September data. So yeah, that's what basically kind of what we're getting at is, you know, there's areas where we're confirming that, yep, there is good coverage there, but there are still some areas where we're saying, hey, you know, at the time of the data, you know, we're not seeing the coverage you're saying. Again, there could be an overlap or a lack of overlap with that. You know, it's imperfect data, but we're kind of doing the best we can.
Hey, Brian?
Yes.
Can you go back to the slide?
Yep.
So, just so you know, your audience, here in Pueblo, we just got finished with the Beulah fire, which is on the western area where you've got some purple. Yep. No LTE. Custer also had their Junkins fire. I noticed there's some significant improvement there in Custer, but nothing over here on the western border of Pueblo. I just wanted to point out, it looks like the areas where they're saying they're not having any coverage, that's going to continue. They're kind of focused on population areas, yet we have issues, you know, in some of the rural terrain limited areas like on western Pueblo.
So what you're saying is based on the recent fires, you guys were still not seeing good coverage in this area and this area. Is that what you're saying?
Or in Custer, the areas that you're saying right there that you're pointing out, you have for no LTE. Those are some areas where we've had some significant events.
Okay.
And then the last question, LTE and band 14 are the same or no?
It will be, yeah. So LTE, basically the band class 14 frequencies will be integrated into the AT&T's network. So AT&T has 120 megahertz of spectrum overall. Yeah, so AT&T has spectrum, you know, all across the board, low band, high band, everything. So the band class 14 in the optimum scenario will basically insert it into their spectrum arsenal, so to speak. And then what they're doing is putting LTE across all the spectrums. Now, some of the spectrum, you know, LTE works better on. There is some spectrum that you can't really do LTE very good on. But the 700 megahertz spectrum that this is about as perfect a spectrum to run LTE as you can get. So, yeah, basically this will kind of go into the arsenal and be used to increase the level of LTE coverage throughout in the areas where they deploy the band class 14 network. Yes.
So the coverage that you're depicting is band 14, or is it a combination cellular coverage?
It's LTE. So, yeah. So LTE. Okay. But yeah. Yeah. So the solution. So basically, what AT&T is saying is that we have our network. Okay. It's got spectrum all across the board. Okay. We're going to basically put the FirstNet network on top of our network. So for the FirstNet network, that's where the Evolved Packet Core comes in. You might be on band class 14 one day. You might be on with band class 12. You guys have? Yeah. So they have band class 12 as well, which is just a little bit lower. So you might be on band class 12 at one point in one area. You might be on band class 14. You might be on some of their 1.9 gig frequencies. It just depends where their frequencies are going, but it's going to be LTE. So LTE is just a technology that runs on top of a variety of spectrum. So basically what they're saying is that you will have the LTE experience in addition, so that the Evolved Packet Core, the public safety core, what it's going to do is allow you to basically hop. It doesn't matter what spectrum you're on. If you're on LTE and you're a public safety user, you'll be on the Evolved Packet Core, the nationwide Evolved Packet Core, and so therefore it will be the LTE experience. So you have to think of it not just as band class 14, you have to think of it as think of it as the technology. The LTE is the technology that operates across multiple bands when you're out there in the field. Yeah. Does that make sense? Anything, Marcus?
I just want to weigh in on a couple things real quickly. So a unique element of this is that it is an all-band solution. So across anywhere where there's native AT&T LTE services, you'll have quality of service, priority, and preemption on the FirstNet core. Beyond that, what you see is a depiction of where we're going to be at the end of this year, 2017. By the end of 2018, we're committed to overlaying our entire native infrastructure and bringing that up to our LTE services throughout the nation, not just in Colorado, but throughout the nation. Beyond that, we're working with our roaming partners, and we're going to overlay their infrastructure and bring that up to our 4G LTE criteria, and we're going to have that traffic switch on our core as well to smooth out that end user experience. And then we're utilizing, because we're uniquely allowing for this to take place across all AT&T LTE bands, we don't have to wait on allocating or rolling out band class 14 in order for this quality of service, priority, and preemption to be available to public safety and first responders. But we're going to use that spectrum to augment and enhance our coverage and our capacity throughout the nation. So we have a number of benchmarks that we're efforting toward, including our efforts this year, where we'll be next year. But we've rolled out a 5-year plan to the state of Colorado to show what that looks like. And then on top of that, just specific to the FirstNet initiative, we've allocated new site builds throughout the state, and we'll be moving toward those build-outs throughout the first 5 years. And then in addition to that, we have our business as usual processes from a commercial standpoint which will continue and enhance our network beyond even that. So there's a lot of additional network elements coming. Is our network perfect? Absolutely not. Nobody recognizes that or is more clearly aware of that than we are. So we're uniquely positioned to address those challenges, and we're actively partnering with the state to identify where those coverage gaps exist and to put plans in place to address that.
Yeah, Marcus, I don't know if right now is the appropriate time, or I could ask it later, but I've got 3 important overhead questions to ask related to the program that if we don't opt in, what perhaps your response to those questions would be. So I can.
Yeah, I think that there's a section when Brian goes through, and I don't want to disrupt Brian's presentation too much, but there is a component of opt-in versus opt-out where we'll be able to address that, and I'd be happy to make myself available.
Okay, great.
Some questions?
I'd just like to add one thing. I mean, I think the concept is fantastic, and I really like it, and I understand that to make this happen, we really do need to look for a public-private partnership to make this happen. But I can tell you from the state chiefs level, and I'm not speaking for the state chiefs, but having been involved and having been to this presentation with the with the State Chiefs Association, is that you have 97 or 98% of the population covered, but as far as fire goes, the majority of the agencies that participate within the State Chiefs Association are voluntary agencies. A lot of them are rural, mountainous, those sorts of regions. And those are the people that aren't getting the coverage necessarily that they think they need. So what is your plan to, I know you have this huge investment that you're going to make into the future if this comes to fruition, but what is truly your plan to filling in those rural areas and those mountainous areas and those sorts of things that really aren't going to have much payback for you on the commercial side?
Sure.
Or no payback, really.
And that's great commentary, and thank you for sharing that with us. It's an important component of this is to understand that we are contractually obligated to build out our coverage in the rural area at the same percentage levels as we are in the urban areas, right? So there's that component of it. Another important component of it is this is not a business as usual or commercial approach for AT&T. We've stood up a brand new business unit within AT&T that is specifically dedicated to FirstNet. We've committed 25 years contractually and $40 billion to the project. And so we understand the sensitivity around rural coverage. So we are committed through our own native network build out, new site allocations, working with our rural partners and deployable assets, which Brian will touch on here in a little bit, to providing coverage in rural areas where they did previously exist, regardless of population density. So we have a firm commitment to that. Is that going to happen overnight? Absolutely not. But we are committed to wherever there is public safety and first responders, providing resources, mechanisms, and capabilities, even if ultimately that's satellite capabilities, to provide wireless coverage and access to the FirstNet network throughout the state of Colorado and throughout the nation. So, and we're happy to meet with your specific communities to talk about what does that look like for you, what do those timeframes look like, how does that impact you not only today but moving forward. So, yes, sir.
You said you're contractually obligated to whom?
So sorry.
I want to say that once the decision before the state of Colorado, so the FirstNet core is coming to Colorado. Congress has said there will be a nationwide broadband network for public safety. When we first started this, we thought it was going to be just band 14. We went out with the RFP, and AT&T really thought outside the box and said, okay, we'll open up our entire network, our all band, we'll do the 14, but it'll be seamless to all public safety users. So what the governor has to decide right now is, are they going to go with this plan, or is the state going to build their own RAN? Are they going to enter into their own public-private partnership? And so what Brian's been doing is going around saying, look, coverage is king, and we know we need that. This is what they're offering. We don't know what some of the alternatives are, but I can tell you that they're working hard on that. And so all of these coverage issues are all, that's part of the engagement and negotiation. I can see the way that AT&T is working with other states that have already opted in. It is an ongoing consultation. They have a 5-year plan, which is here's how we're going to build out to cover some of those rural concerns. Working with Brian and the team saying, what are your gaps? Tell us, we want to make this work. We have our business as usual, but we also have this FirstNet public safety only towers that we might not build otherwise, but we recognize that the state has identified those as areas that need broadband services. So whether or not you choose to adopt is a secondary decision. So the first is, who's going to build the RAN? You can choose this plan, opt in, or opt out and do it differently. Brian, we'll go into what that's like.
And Jeff, just real quickly on your contractually obligated question, I just want to expand on that just a little bit and say, if the state chooses to opt in, that just allows for us to start executing against the plan, start executing against our commitments and our network build out. It's still incumbent upon us to go out and meet with each county seat, local municipal body, department and agency, understand intricately your operational requirements and objectives, and make sure that we can meet those. We still have to earn your business. You are not mandated or obligated to adopt AT&T or FirstNet services in any way, shape, or form. It's incumbent upon us to be very competitive, understand how we deliver services and technologies and solution sets to your departments and agencies, and go out there and execute against that. So we will still have a direct strategic partnership with you, as well as our commitments to FirstNet and the state to build out the network throughout the state and throughout the nation.
And FirstNet is focused on making this work nationwide, whether you choose to opt in, opt out. It's just what you feel is best for you. Good question, Mark.
Probably jumping way ahead here, but from a prioritization standpoint, so obviously, you know, hitting all the rural areas in any state is a daunting task. So, you know, say within Colorado, how are the priorities going to be established between, you know, is it a higher priority between Route County and Pueblo County or Custer County to continue to build all this network out?
Excellent. So, one of the things we did, so based on the drive test, so, you know, we looked at the maps, and again, you know, we've had the opportunity to look at more detailed maps, look at drive testing. We sat down, and we said, okay, where are some gaps in our state? Where are some of the key gaps? And at this point, we focused primarily on roadways, and identifying gaps in roadways. And so this map shows it's a little hard to see. So basically, the red and the yellow are gaps we've identified. We'll zoom in on this region. So this region are gaps we've identified. So basically, what we said is, you know, for example, 096, Custer County, we did that again. We did not getting out of Custer County. To your point, Jeff, kind of the Beulah area, getting over here, we basically said that, you know, here's some gaps that we've got in this area. So what we went through this process and identified gaps throughout the state. And to your point, so we basically said, you know, here's a whole list of gaps. You know, Walcott to Steamboat, Gunnison to Crescent View, Dove Creek to Grand Junction. These are gaps throughout the state. Now, at first, AT&T said, okay, we want you guys to prioritize these gaps, and I kind of pushed back and said, you know, that's me as the state prioritizing one county over the other county is probably not in my best interest, and it's not really my job to prioritize county over county or municipality over municipality. So what we've stated is, here's the gaps, and you know, it keeps going. What we said is here's all the gaps, where, you know, we've identified, kind of the first level gaps, again, based on roadways. So this doesn't get into some of the federal areas that are, you know, recreational areas and that kind of stuff. So what we did is we sat down and we worked with AT&T's engineers and said, okay, here's what we see. And some of these are ones that AT&T said, yeah, we know. So using the guys in the Crescent View example, Highway 135, they said, yeah, we know there's a hole there. You know, you leave Gunnison and you drop coverage for about 15 miles and then you pick it up right outside of Crescent View. So what AT&T has said is we're aware of that, and that's an area we're already looking at. You know, so we're trying to find a tower in there. We think it's just one tower we need to kind of cover that hole. That should be fairly straightforward and fairly simple to cover, and it's something already on our radar screen. At the other end of the spectrum, we've been talking about Cooter Canyon. So, you know, Highway 14 from Fort Collins all the way into Walden. It's very, very, very mountainous, very steep box canyon, you know, with the river in the middle. And what AT&T has said is, yes, again, we know that's a very difficult area to cover. We don't have coverage there, but it's going to cost a lot of money and take a lot of resources because it's all on federal land. And for example, we just put a TTRS tower up there. It took 16 years. From the time we realized we needed coverage to the time we actually got the tower constructed, it took 16 years to get through all the bureaucracy of getting a tower, a new tower built. So what we've been doing is kind of, we've been saying we want, you know, the Beulah area over, you know, the Dove Creek area. What we've been trying to do is identify kind of the areas where everyone agrees there's coverage and there's already some efforts to address that, and then put those in the bucket, and then put the next in the bucket and say, okay, here's some other areas that maybe a little harder, you know, maybe you might take 2 or 3 towers versus just 1 tower to solve, and then identify the buckets, like Glenwood Canyon, some of them, okay, we're probably never going to have wall-to-wall coverage from, you know, in Glenwood Canyon. It's just not possible. But what we said is let's work to kind of, you know, narrow that gap down in Glenwood Canyon. So those really, really difficult ones, that Dove Creek example, getting from Grand Junction to Dove Creek, it's going to take a lot of resources to do that. So we've kind of tried to prioritize in the 3 buckets, kind of low-hanging fruit, the next level, and then the ones that are really difficult and probably take a long time. So that's kind of what we've been doing, and we presented that to AT&T. Our governing body's been kind of reviewing that and working through that. That's our approach to that. In terms of over and above this first effort, that's kind of in the opt-in scenario. That's really where we see our program office evolving into, is that group that we will continue to go around the state and work with local jurisdictions to say, okay, where have they filled in on the promise of getting coverage, and where have they not filled in on the promise of getting coverage, and why? And let's push that to the state, because what we feel is, you know, when you're talking at a national level, the state's going to have, if we speak collectively, we're going to have a lot more influence than if it's one little jurisdiction, especially a small volunteer fire department, you know, in the mountains. They're not going to have a very big voice. If we can consolidate our voice and speak at a state level, again, in an opt-in situation, we feel we'll have a much more powerful voice. So that's where we see us going in the future on these priorities for coverage. Does that answer your question? Okay. Yes.
So, let me just regurgitate this, just simplistic. The agencies locally are going to engage AT&T directly for their service, but AT&T is obligated. I think you didn't quite hear the answer, so if I misspeak, please correct me. AT&T is obligated at the national level, is that correct? To provide coverage.
Yeah, so the contract
I'm talking about is everybody coming together in Colorado collectively to go to that national level.
Yeah, so the contract is between AT&T and FirstNet. So the AT&T's contractual obligation is to FirstNet. Any relationship, if again, this is an opt-in situation, we opt in and your agency, your specific agency chooses to use FirstNet, as Marco said, you know, in either an opt-in or an opt-out scenario, nobody has to use FirstNet. If you're happy with your current wireless carrier in either scenario, you can keep them. So they're an opt-in scenario. If your agency opts in, basically your relationship with AT&T will look just like it looks today. You will be a consumer. You'll cut them a check. If whatever you have to negotiate, you can negotiate, but it will be on an agency by agency basis. So at the national level, it's where they're held accountable. We as the state do not have visibility into that contract. So we don't know what those performance standards are. We don't know what the metrics are. We don't know what the penalties are. So what I was saying earlier in terms of opting in, if we do opt in, you know, if we have a fractured voice across, you know, all the different jurisdictions, and we're having issues with it, you know, we don't see each of your agencies having a very big voice trying to beat up on the national, you know, level. So what we do is, what we're saying is, if we opt in and we have issues, because those performance requirements are at the federal level, we would see the state collectively, when I say state, I'm talking collectively, as a better way to, you know, have our voice heard. Yep.
Yes, absolutely, everything you said is true. That the federal, the contract relationship is between FirstNet and AT&T. However, part of that contract was that AT&T needed to make a plan. Here's how we're going, what we're going to do for Colorado. And that's what FirstNet will be looking at to say, to hold AT&T accountable. And so, okay, they do going to do this coverage, you know, how's it going, and continuing to work with the state in that collaborative way as much as possible. AT&T, part of the contract, AT&T also has to make, they're required to make certain targets, get a certain number of adoptions. If not, then they're fine. And the reason for that is that they need to earn your business. They need to develop a network that actually meets the intent, which is
And Jeff, we do have a very specific number of new site commitments throughout the state of Colorado, just in the first 5 years alone, to enhance coverage within the state. So we do have state level commitments with every state in the nation, right? We have our national contract with federal FirstNet, but we have customized state plans that we're delivering to every state in the nation, 5 territories in the District of Columbia. And we have to execute against those specific to the commitments that we memorialize with the governor's office.
All right, questions on coverage or gaps before moving to the next section? Okay. So cost and pricing. When you look at the overall cost and pricing, it's going to look a lot like what it does now. If you're an current AT&T customer, or really if you're any cellular customer, you know, they all operate fairly similarly. So basically, it's going to be based on national procurement vehicles, NASPO, GSM, NFPA. There's a whole bunch of others. You know, basically these joint public procurement vehicles. So what AT&T has done is gone and worked with those entities to say, okay, well, let's set up a national structure for price procurement. And they've set, the way those procurement vehicles work is they set a ceiling price. So basically you say, okay, no one will ever pay more than this amount of money for this type of service. Now, if your agency works out a different deal, you know, a better deal with AT&T, that's kind of what you would do, is you would sit down and say, okay, here's the parameters of the national procurement vehicle or the state procurement vehicle, whatever it happens to be. But then for our specific agency, you kind of work out what those details are. A couple key things we're going to talk about is how this prioritization is going to work, and the idea of primary and extended users, what that means for you guys, and what kind of this idea of uplifting or dynamic traffic management. And the other thing we're going to talk about is kind of pooled versus unlimited. Basically, within these procurement vehicles, there's 2 primary mechanisms: one on an unlimited plan, one a pool. So primary versus extended users. So basically, you know, in the national statute, there's two definitions of first responder. One is basically your first in, first responder. One is basically says first responder, first in, first responder, or anybody else that helps them. So what AT&T has said is that the primary users are going to be your first in, first responders. Police, fire, EMS. They've expanded it to emergency management and 911 as well. So if you're one of those 5 groups, you'll be considered what's called a primary user. So this prioritization, the preemption, kind of all of the bells and whistles that you will get, those people will get those services as part of the standard price. So if it's $20 a month for the device and you're a police officer, you will get that as part of your package. If you're an extended user, now think extended user as transportation, public works, you know, maybe your communications office, not 911, but you know, your more public communications office, schools, you know, if you integrate with your schools, those will be what's called extended users. So those folks will have access to the network. But if you want them to have that day-to-day prioritization and preemption, you'll have to pay $7.50 a line more. Now, if you don't want to do that, so if you say, hey, you know what, my public works folks don't need prioritization and preemption every day, but if you've got a big event, there'll be a mechanism where somebody in your jurisdiction will have the ability to log into a site, basically what's called uplifting. So if you've got a bad incident and it's kind of an all hands on deck type thing, and you basically say everybody needs to be uplifted, you can do that for free for 24 hours. So you can basically say for the next 24 hours, everyone that's on the network will have the prioritization, the preemption, all of that functionality. And then when the event's over, you go back to your first in, you know, your primary users will have the prioritization preemption, and your extended users will not. again, so basically what it will force you to do is kind of really think through who you want to have that prioritization expansion on a day-to-day basis. Because anyone outside of those 5 groups, you will be paying that $7.50 a line a month for that additional service. So as you start to work with AT&T on that, you'll have to really think through that, and really figure out who is it you want to have that prioritization person.
I just wanted to quickly comment that in an event where you're uplifting extended primary users, if an event extends beyond that 24-hour period, you can extend that uplift capability to those end users. So for the life of that incident, you can provide them the same level of priority access to the FirstNet network that your first responders will have.
Yeah, and then what they said, like Jeff, you mentioned fires earlier, if you've got a fire, you've got folks out there for a full week or something, what AT&T has said is, we'll deal with those situations, kind of on a case-by-case basis, and obviously if if someone's out there for a week fighting fire, you can do it for the whole week, so you're not having to kind of re-go in there every time and uplifting them every day. So, those big, long, extended ones will kind of be addressed based on that. Okay. So, with the unlimited plan, pretty straightforward. Basically, you purchase a device and you get unlimited data. Now, there's different price points, whether it's a smartphone or a cellular modem or a feature phone, that kind of thing. But basically, just I think as most of us are used to our personal cell phone now, you pay a certain amount a month, you get unlimited data. The one caveat for the unlimited is for the primary users, there is a cap on the unlimited data that hits prioritization. And 22 gigs. 22 gigs. Yeah. If you hit that cap, if you exceed 22 gigs 3 months consecutively, we will come to you and identify and say, does this specific end user really need this amount of data throughput? What's this specific use case? Could this end user be better served by being in a different plan? We're not going to do any of that without working with you directly, but we'll put certain alert mechanisms in the system to identify, hey, for the 3rd month in a row, Brian Shepard is getting ready to exceed his 22 gig threshold. Let's talk about that and make sure that that's a legitimate use case, or maybe something that's unbeknownst to you and that you may want to rein in yourself. And that, one of the things we talked to them about is, there's some, an agency that says, hey, I want to put a remote camera and live stream HD video, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, wirelessly. Any wireless network's not really designed to do that. And so I think that's one of the things that, what we've been talking about is, as we get to different technologies, body cams are the other big thing. Most folks just download them, but I know there are some agencies that are starting to go to streaming their body cams, and that's the one thing, video is a nightmare on a network. It will bring any network down, very hard. So I think that's one of the things that AT&T says, for these specialized uses, we want to look at these devices and applications and figure out how do we manage that for the betterment of the entire network. So.
What do you do for basic plans?
So the other mechanism is the pool plan. So basically, the other way to do this is to say, okay, this person's not a power user, or I've got a group of people that aren't power users, and I'm going to purchase an amount of data. So 2 gigs, 5 gigs, 50 gigs, and I'm going to distribute that across a series of, or a group of devices. Those devices can be modems, those devices can be smartphones, again. So, and then depending on it, there's different line charts. So basically, that's the other option, to say, okay, I've got some folks that are pretty basic users. I'm going to pool all of those users into this group, and they're going to share that data. So, it's a great idea if you've got a lot of different users that don't really use a lot of data. The only thing with this one is you will incur overage fees. So if you go over your 50 gigs or your 5 gigs, you will incur overage fees. So really what it does, and most of you guys are probably using this today, is, it'll kind of force you to manage your groups. I know when I was at AdCom and managing it, I had a handful of folks that, back then I wish I would have had an unlimited plan, because they always got the overage fees because they were power users. But a lot of those folks didn't use that much. They just basically used it for, basic cat notifications. There was not a lot of data. So what it does is really it allows you to look at your usage and figure out who's using what type of applications, what type of devices, what's the frequency of their use, and meld these two options, the pooled and the unlimited, together. And you can't have both. So your account, you can have both pool plans and unlimited plans in that same account.
I guess you're missing what I'm saying. We got flip phones and non-smartphones in our system still.
Yeah, we have feature phones. So we have a rate plan. This is just the most predominant rate plans that Brian's sharing. We have a litany of plans available, right? The intent here, when we developed these plans was to put them on national contracts. So from a procurement standpoint, they would look and feel and exist much like what you do today, almost exactly like what you do today. The intent was that we would be at or below what you're paying today operationally. And the intent is that we deliver that so a small department of 3 individuals has the same purchasing power as Denver PD, right? Aurora PD. So that we're in this environment, or we'll come back to this, just because the state opts in, that obligates us to build the RAN and take on the risk of building out the network, right? Financial and otherwise. But it's still incumbent upon us to go out there and be hyper competitive in all aspects of the market to earn your business, including costs. So we would work with you individually to make sure that we have a strong understanding of what your cost and budget constraints are, but also what your end user environment looks like, and we would build rate plan structures and device deployment structures to meet those operational requirements and objectives.
So if the state opts out, I mean, you're still building out your network. I mean, what's the ramifications? You just higher prices, or
We'll get that. Let's talk. Yeah, as I mentioned, so this is just a high-level overview. As I said, there's a lot more detail in the private portal. Those contracts are just multi-page contracts for the national. So there's a lot more detail. What we wanted to do today is kind of, as I said, summarize the highlights and the key factors of what this looks like, and I encourage you guys to go in and look at the more detailed information. So the other big element we want to talk about is what AT&T's individual responsible user. Think of this as your volunteer firefighter. So someone that is likely paying out of their own pockets, for their phone, but using it for work. Obviously, you want that volunteer firefighter to have the same functionality on the network as the person, as the paid firefighter. So what they will allow to do is, for people that use their own personal devices for their job, they will have access to the same pricing, the same rate structure, and the same functionality through this program of individual responsible user. So again, as an agency, if we opt in and you sit down with AT&T, there'll be this element for those folks that you have in your organization that utilize their own personal phones for their job. So this is in there. They had subsidization plan. If you want to get your folks the phone and subsidize over 2 years, just like the other elements are, there's there. Or if you're currently an AT&T user and you just want to turn the phone onto the network, you can do that. So there is this element of folks that bring their own devices to their job that they're paid for to have the same functionality and cost structure. The agency cost calculator, we're working on putting together a tool that you'll be able to use as we go through this process that you can kind of plug in. Hey, I've got 200 modems, I've got 40 smartphones, and here's what the cost of the smartphones are going to be, and here's the rate plan. And we'll kind of calculate out what it looks like for you long term. So you can say, okay, this is what it looks like. You can adjust the pool versus the unlimited plan, and look at that and say, okay, if I do all unlimited versus half unlimited and half pool, what does that look like? So really, it's a tool to help you as you start to get the firm numbers, be able to plug those numbers in and analyze over the next 2 to 3 years what your costs are going to be for your initiative. So that will be up on our website here very soon. So some of the other kind of big issues we want to talk about as we think through this, we don't have a lot of details on this. Even the private portal, these are areas where we've been talking about this with AT&T and FirstNet. So LMR integration. Obviously, that's becoming critical is to be able to integrate the LTE technology with the LMR technology. As I mentioned, both Harris and Motorola, James and Kenwood, their new radios work on both LTE and LMR. You have the software applications you can tie into your ISSI that allow you to, on a smartphone, have access to your trunk talk groups. But that has to go through the ISSI interfaces, which either, in PPCRN they have one, the state of the DTRS one, FRCC has one. So that's one of the things we have to look at is how is that going to go forward. And what AT&T has said is they will support this LMR integration, but we're not quite sure what that details look like. Part of that, again, is because every state is different. Some states are going with ISSI, some states are Motorola, some states are Harris. So it's gonna kind of, be an evolving, journey on trying to figure out how we hook up, the LMR systems. But just something to think about, as you're going through the state plan and as you're looking at this, how are we gonna interface our LMR technology? Because what we have seen in our trials is that really helps the adoption, when you look at some of these devices, like the phone devices. And you can essentially use that as both the radio and the cell phone. What we've seen is folks really gravitate to that, and it can be very, very powerful to have that technology all in one device. Application integration, we got a lot of questions. There's a lot of talk about the App Store, the App Store for public safety. People have said, well, oh my gosh, are my current apps going to still be able to work? Yes. So when we talk about the application ecosystem at this, basically think of, FirstNet is trying to basically create like an app store for public safety apps. They're going to create some APIs that people will be able to develop against. They're going to do some verification, make sure that there's no malware, that kind of thing on apps that might tie into some of the core network services. But your apps will still work like your phone. If there's a certain app you're using for situational awareness, whatever, that's still going to work. The other piece, obviously, is the CAD, RMS, JMS vendors. We're hoping that they will come to the table now and start to be a bit more friendly than they have in the past. Those applications are really key. And, so if you have your integrated CAD, RMS, and JMS, and you have those applications, those are still going to work as well. So again, this network will function just like a normal cellular network. But as we look forward, that's one of the things we want to look at. How can we get to that point where we do have data share? Because those types of issues go far beyond just the network. There's some other factors in that. And then lastly, deployables that Marcus mentioned. So as we said, we're never going to get 100% coverage in our state. And in addition to that, we have, when I go down to Telluride folks, that they talk about all the festivals they have and how they just get overloaded, every summer when people are down there. And so part of the solution is going to be deployables. So what AT&T has stated is that there's going to be 72 deployable assets throughout the country. I think the big still on the wheels. So the big diesel trucks with the boom on top that can go up to, I think it's 60 feet or.
The boom goes 60 feet.
Yeah, 60 feet up. They have satellite backhaul. If you've been involved in a big fire or big incident in the rural areas, you've probably seen one. So there's going to be 72 of those throughout the country. What AT&T is saying is they're going to shoot for a 4 to 6 hour response time. So there'll be a process where you as a jurisdiction call and say, hey, we need one of the still on wheels for our incident. They said they're going to basically strategically place those to shoot for a 4 to 6 hour response time, with the response time guaranteed of 14 hours. So the longest response time would be 14 hours. There'll be a process that your agency will be able to call in, get those deployed, and set up and have those up and functioning, whether it's a planned event or a disaster that you have to react to quickly.
Yeah. So I just want to comment, we already have hundreds of assets available through our NDR program, which is our National Disaster Recovery Program, and they're already in use throughout the nation in support of wildfires, floods, et cetera, right? Great success in that program. The 72 assets that Brian's talking about are just specific to the FirstNet program. So these are brand new assets that we're bringing to bear, and just the first assets that we're bringing to bear that will be requestable at state and local level. So our process right now is a FEMA requestable process, and we utilize those assets throughout the nation all of the time, but these are additional assets that we're developing and deploying just specific to the FirstNet initiative, just in the same way that we are committing to new site builds and pulling forward network enhancements and putting sites in places that from a business as usual standpoint or commercial standpoint would have been years out down the roadmap, if ever at all. So this is a unique approach to our business model and a deep dedication to providing the type of assets that first responders need to get coverage where they need it, when they need it.
And the other thing we talked with AT&T about and have committed to is looking into agency-owned assets. So, while some of these ones Marcus is talking about, they're pretty significant assets, but there's other, there's cell-light trucks, there's other technologies that can be used in a deployable fashion. So what we talked to them is to say, okay, let's say the state wants to buy a couple of these and be able to, get them out, or local jurisdiction says, you know what, we have a lot of issues, so we want our own deployable asset. That you will be able to purchase your own deployable asset and work with AT&T to get that up. So that, again, there'll be a process where if you've got your own asset, you'll say, all right, we need to deploy the asset. Here's how it is. You'll work with their engineers to get it lit up on the network, make sure it's running, and push it up. So that again, there's not a lot of details around that, but that's something we've been pushing on AT&T to commit to. Say, okay, we are gonna have some agencies, especially when you look at, some of the high mountain areas that, if one road gets, closed, there's no way, whoop, I have to go back and public that, so. There you go. Some of the areas in the mountains that said, we probably need our own assets because, if one road gets cut off, there's no way that asset's gonna be able to get to us in 46 hours or even 14 hours. So we might want our own. So that's something we'll look at, again, in an opt-in situation. That's what we see our office getting to is that group that basically sits down with AT&T and will say, okay, here's how we want to structure this program, for local jurisdictions or the state to be able to implement their own assets in a deployable fashion. So one of the things we have up on our website is some regional checklist decision packets. What we've done is put together some PowerPoint slides and some presentations that go through that are similar to this, but go into much, much greater detail. There's two versions. There's the version that if you are not a registered state plan portal user, and there's the version if you are a registered state plan portal user. Obviously, the ones on the website are for the public version. For those people that have registered, we will email those to you. And basically what it is a comprehensive deck, like 100 slides, that really walks you through all these issues in much greater detail, in addition to some of the other factors. We've also included an analysis. What we had one of our consultants, Ulrich, go out and spend some time with mostly communications and IT folks and say, okay, what are the key issues? We had an interview some rural folks, some urban folks, and say, what are your key issues? What would be the deal breakers for you in deciding whether to opt in or opt out or adopt this network or not adopt this network? Is it security? Is it coverage? Is it pricing? Is it application integration? What are these key issues for you? And he's gone through and put together basically a summary document where, I think he's got 10 to 12 areas where it's, okay, these are the critical areas that state, communication and CIOs and jurisdictions have said are critical in decision-making for communication. And then what he's done is gone through and said, okay, in the state plan, this section is addressed very well and very good. This section, is not addressed as well as we'd hope. This section really needs some work, that kind of thing. So that's part of that process. To really kind of help you guide them. The consultants we have, Randy Nemo, have, I think, 30, 40, 50 years of cellular experience, both in the public and private sector. So we wanted to use their expertise to kind of really help guide that process, to kind of give you a guide through that. So that's available. We will be emailing those out, especially, like I mentioned, the ones on the private portal to users that are registered. So be looking for that and contact us if you want a copy of that. Okay, so the alternative opt-out process. We began our opt-out process back in March with an RFP. We realized the timing of this was going to be compressed, so we wanted to get a head start on this. So we submitted an RFP back in March for an alternative plan. Basically, what we said is we're going to issue a conditional RFP for someone who would be interested in developing an opt-out network for us if that's the route the governor chooses to go. We had 2 rounds of bids. We had 2 qualified bidders throughout the summer, and our review committee, which is basically a subsection of our governing body, Don Navarro's on that committee, met last week to kind of review the bids. Now, we had no clear-cut winner at the time, so what we've done is we've entered into competitive negotiations. The state procurement allows us to basically say, okay, if there's no clear-cut winner after the standard review process, you can enter into competitive negotiations. What that is you have the ability to sit down with each vendor and talk one-on-one and have one-on-one conversations with them about their bid. Say, okay, hey, here's what we liked about your bid, here's what we did not like about your bid. What would you do to fix that? So right now we're in that. We had our first call with them on Wednesday, and we'll be hopefully wrapping up that process. So we can't get into a whole lot of detail about what those bids look like until we finish the procurement process. But as soon as we do, what we'll basically do is say, okay, here's the winning bidder, and here's the summary of their plan, and here's what it looks like. Now, some of the parameters that we put out in place. We went about this by realizing that the days of us, going to our local elected officials and saying, hey, I need $10 million or $200 million to build a new network are probably over. So what we did is in the RFP, we told the vendors we want a creative financing mechanism, business model that will have no upfront capital to the state or local jurisdictions. So in the event we opt out, we will not have any upfront capital costs to the state or to local jurisdictions. The second thing we said is the network has to be self-sustaining. We've learned our lesson through our DTR journeys over the last 15 years. And so what we said is, this network will be a pay-for-use network. If you utilize it, just like if we opt in, AT&T's not going to let you utilize the network for free. If we opt out, we're not going to let you utilize the network for free. So you will pay a service fee every month, just like you would pay AT&T. So what we've said is the network needs to be self-sustaining. So whatever business model you have, you need to model it that the user fees that you collect will self-sustain the network, the staffing, everything. So that we're not going back to the state legislature every year and saying, can we please have more money? You're not going to your elected officials saying, hey, we need more money. It's basically built into the business model that the user fees will cover the overall operations of the network. Those are the two key parameters we set forth in the RFP that all the bidders have come back with and agreed to. So we've got some good, interesting approaches to that. The other thing is the NTIA. So as I mentioned, the law states that we get a portion of the money allocated to AT&T. If we choose to opt out, we've been waiting for that. That was the thing that was kind of holding things up. So what the NTIA came back and said is we were allocated between $71 and $88 million. There's a range that's dependent on what other states do. If every state opts out, we get the $70.8 million. If we're the only state that opts out, we'll get to $88.5 million. So we can kind of, use a round number, let's say $80 million. So basically, if we opt out, the state gets $80 million from the NTIA to go towards the capital construction, or it's just the capital cost. So the money from the NTIA is only for capital construction. We can't use that for ongoing maintenance. So what we did is we updated all the vendors, the bid on that, and we said, okay, here's the amount of money that we would get from the NTIA in the event we did opt out, update your financials. And so that's been part of this process we've been going through with the competitive negotiations, is working through what those numbers look like and how that impacts the capital cost of that bid. So that's kind of the key parameters we're looking at. To answer some of your questions about, if we were to opt out, is AT&T going to continue to offer service? Yes, just like Verizon and T-Mobile are going to continue to offer service. So, when we talk about opting out, as Tracy mentioned, it's the law states we have to be interoperable with the nationwide network. And that's really not that big of a deal with this. The technology that this is based off of is an international standard. Every cell phone carrier in the world utilizes the 3GPP standard, the LTE. That's why you can go to Mexico or Europe or Canada, anywhere, and your phone works, because it's all the same standard. There's basically two equipment manufacturers in the world that probably have a 98% market share for the infrastructure, the radios at the tower. Ericsson and Nokia. AT&T uses Ericsson and Nokia. Verizon uses Ericsson and Nokia. If we opt out, we're going to use Ericsson and Nokia. So the technology is going to be the same. The infrastructure is going to be the same. In an opt-out situation, the devices are going to be the same. Manufacturers don't build devices just for one vendor. They build devices that work across multiple vendors. So in that scenario, yeah, if we opt out, all the other carriers will still, offer services to local jurisdictions and piece of that. So that's one of the things we're looking at in this opt-out scenario. Okay, do we think we can get enough market share? And that's one of the things we had our bidders say is, what is your anticipated market share? Do you anticipate 80% of the vote to be market share? Probably unrealistic. Do you anticipate 25 to 30% of the market share? That's probably more realistic, or 50 or whatever. So that's some of the things we're looking at are there market share projections within the bounds of reality, based on the fact that even in an opt-out scenario, we still have people using Verizon. We'll still have people using AT&T. Hopefully we'll have a significant number of people using the opt-out network if that's the route we go down, but we have to factor that into it. But in terms of interoperability, the technology is the same. So it's going to look the same as the end user, either way we go with that. Does that answer your question, you guys? Yeah. Okay. So if the state opts out, what will it look like? So as I mentioned, we have to provide formal notice to FirstNet, the FCC, and the NTIA basically by December 28th. It's pretty standard form to fill out, and we basically say we're going to opt out. The law then says we have 180 days to complete our RFP, which we'll be ahead of that game. The RFP process will already be complete. What the FCC did in their notice for the first test is say, we're going to give you an extra 60 days. So when you look at it, we would have, if we were to opt out, we would have 240 days, 8 months, to put our plan together and actually, present it to the FCC and say, okay, here's our plan. We want you to review it. The law states the FCC has the first review process, and they're reviewing interoperability. So they're the ones that are going to basically check the box and says, yep, their plan technically will be interoperable with the nationwide network. Again, to ensure that interoperability with our neighbors. If they opt in or opt out, everyone has to be interoperable. So that's the first step we have. So we'll have 240 days. The FCC has stated that they have an aspirational shot clock. Aspirational is their way of saying we're not going to commit to anything, but we're really going to try hard. To give them credit, they've been, they understand the gravity of this. So I think I've got confidence the FCC will meet that 90-day shot clock period. And again, that is just the technical interoperability. So once we complete that process, we then go to the NTIA, and the NTIA basically reviews our business model, our plan for operations, our financial plan. Would our partner have the amount of money necessary? Or are they some fly-by-night, company, that kind of thing. So we have to go through that process to basically prove we can do what we say we're going to do. And then after that, then we enter into negotiations with FirstNet for the spectrum management lease agreement. That's basically access to the spectrum. FirstNet has been granted sole custody of the spectrum from the FCC. So just as AT&T is entering into basically a sublease agreement with FirstNet for the spectrum, we as the state would enter into the same lease agreements for that spectrum. And so that's where we're starting conversations with FirstNet on that. We met with their lawyers on Wednesday or Tuesday to talk through kind of that spectrum lease agreement and what's in there. So that's kind of the process that it looks like if we opt out. And, so the other question I get often is, so is the state going to go have, 100 people operating this network and plugging towers and doing this? And the answer is no. Our model for this is really a public-private partnership. So, there's a lot of folks getting involved in telecommunications infrastructure. A lot of companies see this type of infrastructure as a good long-term investment for them. They can capitalize in other areas. And one of the key elements of this is the spectrum. So just as AT&T will utilize the spectrum both for public safety and for some of the commercial users, any partner that we get can utilize that spectrum for commercial purposes and public safety purposes, the infrastructure that is built. So, we will look for a partner to basically build, operate, and maintain this network on behalf of the state. And again, when I say the state, I say that collectively, to do that. Will we have to create some management functionality? Yeah, we'll have to do that. But we're not going to be, creating another division within the state to really focus on this. This will be a true public-private partnership where we will have that engagement. And the other key thing, what we said in our RFP, I forgot to mention, is that we need to use the existing infrastructure. So, a greenfield build is not viable in this. To build this network from scratch is not viable with the amount of money we have. So what we said is, you need to utilize either another carrier's infrastructure. You need to work with American Tower or Crown Castle to utilize their towers. We've offered up our public towers. So, one of the things we did when we were in AdCom, we utilized public assets and to build the test network. So that what we said, we've got a lot of public assets. We're looking at trying to figure out how can we utilize DTRS towers for availability. And then that's both an opt-in and an opt-out scenario. How can we utilize public assets? So that's the other key factor that we're looking at is how can we utilize our public assets to help build the network as part of this. So in an opt-out scenario, we're going to be building up existing infrastructure as well. So that's kind of the key, what's opting in, opting out, or what the opt-out process looks like. So to wrap things up and get into the question, what does opting in mean? Really it means, as we've talked about, that for this network, what we're saying is, okay, we're going to use AT&T and basically take the commercial model and say, okay, we're going to use the commercial model, give it some oomph, with the money and the spectrum and some of the requirements that they have, and build upon that for our mission critical public safety needs from a cellular perspective. It will help with better coverage and performance, as Marcus mentioned. They will patent the core. Will help a lot of things, provide a lot of functionality. Will help in roaming. So some of the kind of the tweaks that you see at the network edge will hopefully be smoothed out, and we'll have that better coverage with additional sites and so forth. There will be individual agency agreements, as we've talked about. And that is something I think is important to note that we as a state will not have any oversight over the performance of the network. There's pros and cons of that. As Marcus mentioned, they'll still have to compete for their business. But in terms of, kind of having that club or that hammer to go beat somebody over the head with, the state will not have that club or that hammer. That club or hammer will go through FirstNet. So if we as the state are having problems, we'll have to go through FirstNet to then go through AT&T with that. So yeah, and in that scenario, basically, we're still gonna have, various carriers competing for business, in the market. So what does opting out mean? Basically, opting out means the state is saying, you know what, we think we want to manage our part of this network ourselves. And again, saying that with a private partner. As I mentioned, the technology is going to be the same. There's going to be no difference in the technology in an opt-in or an opt-out scenario. Really what it gets down to is, the control and the ability to direct some of the things more directly, with that. We'll build upon existing assets. Again, we cannot build this thing from scratch. There'll be no upfront state or local capital. There'll still be commercial options. So again, if we opt out, you'll still be able to use AT&T if you don't like our opt-out. You'll still be able to use Verizon or T-Mobile if we opt out. There'll still be options for you. Some of the things that we have to look at governance, obviously, if we were to opt out, we would have to have some, conversations about governance in this network. Again, we've had some, good examples of governance in our state. These types of things, we've had some not good, so good examples. How we govern it. Again, because we can't, if we opt out, there's no way we can do that significant support of local jurisdictions. The number of local first responders far outnumber the number of state first responders. So this really would have to be a grassroots effort. I got you. I'm just okay. And so the other thing we're looking at is when we talk about opting out is, are there cursory benefits we can look at when we talk about integrating the 911 efforts or institutional connectivity with healthcare, that kind of thing? Are there some cursory benefits to opting out that we can get through that process? I don't know the answer to. That's kind of what the other thing we're talking with our vendors about, and what would be part of any kind of final presentation to you guys, when we come in. If we go down that path with, okay, here's really what opting out looks like, and here's what the requirements are. So that's kind of the formal presentation. At this point, let's do questions. So I know you've got questions.
Yes, sir. Yeah, these are just three, and you kind of touched on the three broad overhead questions that I think would benefit the group to hear from you. But first question is, how long would it take to get the network up and running if the state were to opt out? You kind of touched on that. Second being, can Colorado wait 2 or 3 years to develop its first responder network while it opts out? Plan is being developed, then be reviewed by the FCC, the NTIA, and FirstNet. And then third is Colorado prepared to use FirstNet as an experiment with building a statewide network for others beyond public safety.
To answer your first question, and second question really is we don't know. We have up to 8 months to put that plan together. As I mentioned, that's why we started our RFP process sooner, is so we can potentially get that plan put together more quickly to the FCC prior to that 8-month period. So I don't know. Some of our bids are utilizing existing cellular infrastructure. So in those situations, they could basically just jump on that right away and start offering service similar to AT&T. Some of the bids would take a lot longer to get, radio time. So we can't answer that question in terms of how long it would take to get this up and running. Obviously, would there be a delay versus opting in? Absolutely. AT&T will be able to turn this thing on basically March of 2018 is when we bought back a core.
Yes, March is when the packet core will be up. We can deliver priority services today. If the state were to opt in today, let's say Friday, we can start delivering priority access with FirstNet services Monday morning.
Right. All the bells and whistles will be up when that ball back the core in March. So that's kind of when we're looking, so it's kind of a initial launch and then a quick launch. So obviously, yeah. So if we opt out, there would be a delay versus if we opt in. But I think one of the things our group's been really looking at is where are we at in this technology transition? This technology will at some point either or merge with or overtake LMR as the fundamental technology for communications. That might be 5 years, 10 years, 15 years down the road. It's a long way down the road, but it's there. So one of the things we're looking at is, okay, basically right now, you are and we all are sustaining 2 networks. We're sustaining our line mobile radio networks, and we're sustaining our cellular and data networks, through payment to either AT&T or Verizon or T-Mobile or Sprint. That probably is not sustainable in the long run. Again, when I talk long run, I'm talking 5, 10 years. So one of the things we're looking at is what is the best way to get to that point where we can start to integrate those technologies. We can start to see some economies of scale. We can start to maybe see some of the overall costs when we look at overall communication costs. One of the things that other half of my job is the rural broadband. And when we look at studies about how much we as public entities spend on communications. It's pretty staggering, how much money we spend on communications, technology. And so that's one of the things we're looking at is what is the best way, maybe not necessarily tomorrow, but what would provide us the best solution in 5 or 10 years down the road. Now, can anyone predict what 5 or 10 years down the road? Absolutely not. Just like if I asked Marcos to predict what the networks will look like in 10 years, he couldn't do that. So what we are doing though is factoring this into this decision to opt in or opt out. Is what is trying to look long term for this. So it is more of an art than a science. So but that's one of the things we're factoring in. The last question about experimenting. We're not experimenting with anything. Really, all we're doing is saying there is a convergence of communications. If I ask you, how many of you would like better, more streamlined communications with your schools? I think that would probably be a good thing. How many of you would like better, more streamlined communications with your emergency hospitals and especially with rural healthcare clinics? That would be a very good thing. So when we talk about these cursory elements, these other institutional elements, we're talking about the other institutional connectivity elements that touch public safety. When you look at the trends for intelligent transportation, the State Patrol is doing it right now. State Patrol and CDOT are sharing information during blizzards and stuff about where CDOT is, where State Patrol is, so we can better react. And as the CDOT director, Shane Labatt, has a pretty crazy vision for what he wants with intelligent transportation in our state. And what that's going to take is a tremendous amount of communications, tremendous amount of data, and a tremendous amount of coordination on that data. So that's kind of what we're looking at, is these key critical institutional aspects that touch public safety. Can we integrate those, again, knowing that they're part of that overall system? Can the network encompass that as we build it out? So it's not really experimentation, it's a matter of looking holistically. So,
yeah, I appreciate that. I just want to, interject very quickly that in my 35 years in public safety as a first responder, and I've not been on the team that long, but the more I'm involved, the more impressed I am with the FirstNet team and how, for lack of better terms, how learning agile they are in overcoming whatever challenges. And I think this is an absolutely terrific program, and my hope, of course, is the state would opt in. But I'm available for any questions anybody has. I worked with you for several years here when I was in Pueblo, and appreciate the time being here.
All I'm saying is, at the end of the day, was before Colorado. Brian has told you an overview of what the FirstNet with the AT&T partner is presenting, or what we're saying. This is what we can do for Colorado with no cost and no risk and no obligation to Colorado. Or the governor can say, okay, thank you very much, but I think that I'm willing to take on that risk and pledge that full faith and credit of the state, and we're going to do it on our own. And so Brian is looking at all the options, doing that due diligence. But when it comes right down to it, is at no risk does the governor say, okay, go ahead, and it'll be up to the public whether agencies want to adopt, or we get, no, I think that we can do it better with ourselves. The FMLA that was mentioned there, that's where the state will be having to pay FirstNet for the use of that spectrum. And that's part of that business model that he's talking about, is working with the RSP. Although he said no upfront costs, there's still that guarantee that it actually, that it is solvent and that it'll work. So that's why it takes 1 to 2 years to go through all those different FCC approval, NTIA review, all that.
And Trace, I don't want to speak out of turn, but I was up in Boulder at the lab last month, and anybody here that would be interested in getting a tour of the lab, they could get a tour, could they not?
Absolutely. So right here in Colorado is the FirstNet National Laboratory that is all working very closely with the Public Safety Research Facility over at NISC, also located in Broadway, and we welcome any interested people to show you what's going on, what the network looks like, working with AT&T, and just that really cool stuff to make communications better for public safety.
Yeah.
Brian's been there.
Yes, so thinking through this, originally Band 14 was kind of the keystone to making FirstNet work, but you could turn on FirstNet tomorrow if the governor opted out, and this doesn't have Band 14, but I'd get preemption. So it's not about Band 14 as much. If the state opts out, how much of it is going to be Band 14 dependent? And I guess where I get on that is, right now, if I have an event, we have some event where we need preemption on an AT&T network, whatever bands are available where that event is would be available. Right? They bring that role. that whole arsenal of their spectrum. So if it's in a Denver area, they have, a decent amount of bandwidth to carry that event. In an opt-out scenario, if your carrier or your partner is going to be deploying mostly band 14, I don't know, then you're going to be limited on that spectrum. Would that be true?
It depends on the partner. So, in the bids, we've seen both, we've seen bids that,
they're bringing spectrum to the table too.
yeah, so it really depends. And then, I think the amount of spectrum, the band class 14 spectrum, our analysts have done some research. That spectrum there's more capacity in that spectrum than any of the analysis that we've done, any event, that spectrum would be able to handle, again, in a dedicated, even if you just have the 20 megahertz of band class 14, that is a ton of spectrum. So, it's, our technical folks have not been able to figure out a scenario where even if we just had full access to band class 14 spectrum, that would not satisfy the needs of an event.
The flip side to that is, in an AT&T scenario, I guess almost all the devices out there would just be available. It's undetermined, I guess, in the state plan whether there'd be new end user equipment needed.
Yeah, again, it depends. The various, I wish I could say more. I don't want to mess up the state procurement, but it depends, and that's one of the factors we're looking at when we look at partners. Absolutely, yes. Yep.
So there is another radio system and a partner that's not here, VHF, and so there are a considerable number of fire departments around the state. On my engines, I have to carry a Motorola, I have to carry a Vindex King, and a Verizon cell phone. And so hopefully maybe you can speak to what is the Department of Interior and what is the Department of Ag. Are they opting? Are federal partners opting in, and are they going to this?
So the opting in, opting out, that's all about just building the ramp. So that's a state deal. It's will they choose to adopt. And so I've been working with Brian and the state about all of these myriad of issues to discuss. There's another partner in my colleague that's doing the same thing with federal entities. They're all very supportive. Again, what's the cost? Does it work with where they can?
Right. The majority of them are on Verizon.
Yeah.
And VHF. They're all on VHF.
Yeah, I think we can talk through that in an opt-in or an opt-out scenario, either one. The users who have to rely on VHF right now, you're going to be relying on VHF for a while. If we opt in or opt out, as Tracy mentioned, all the agencies said, yeah, we're interested in this technology, but there's a reason you're using VHF right now. It's because it's really
work.
Well, and that's the propagation. So the propagation of a cellular network, we're not going to be able to have that same reliability. Again, in an opt-in or opt-out scenario, we're not going to be able to have that same level of coverage and reliability that you need for the VHF system. So you will be using your VHF rate just like your, federal partners. They will be using, even if we opt in, they adopt it, they're still going to be using VHF. So that when we get into the VHF and UHF folks, unfortunately, you're still going to have that issue of having to carry multiple devices. Again, that's one of the things we would like to do. And as we look forward, again, either in an opt-in or an opt-out scenario, what we want our office to be, and so I've talked to the governor about this, and we're working on funding with the state legislature. No matter whether we opt in or we opt out, we see that as really the critical point here, is how do we get to that point where, again, you can have a device and it works wherever you go, and you can do more than just talk on it. You can actually do all the other cool stuff that the folks in Denver can do. That's what we want to get to. We want to get to that point where the technologies merge and the ability for you to do your job is easier. That will happen hopefully in an opt-in or opt-out scenario. So that's the next thing we want to do, again, is have our office really start to focus on, all right, what do we need to do to get, those UHF and VHF users to the level that the DTRS users, because the DTRS user might, you look at, someone who is not a power user, they might be able to use a cell phone and just have their certain talk groups, via the eyes to the side. And so they can get rid of the radio. That'd be fantastic for them. Other obviously, kind of your first line folks won't want to give up that radio for a long time. So, but can we start down that path of saying, let's look at this. What are the low hanging fruit where users that we can maybe get rid of the 4 devices into 2 or hopefully 1. And that's really more, that's on the technology side. So that's not going to change whether we opt in or we opt out. That's about the technology. So that's the other thing we're looking to have our office do, is to work with local jurisdictions to figure out how can we solve those problems with them.
Brian, real quickly, I just wanted to comment that
already today we bring to bear technologies where we deliver enhanced push-to-talk and LMR interoperability, right? We utilize mechanisms, interface ROIP, right, radio over IP, CSSI and ISSI to accomplish that. So almost with every LMR radio system today, we can interoperate and deliver a mechanism to utilize enhanced push-to-talk over LTE in conjunction with your LMR radio system today. Beyond that, though, we're moving towards benchmarks within the contract in the first 5 years where we have to be able to deliver mission-critical voice, mission-critical video, Z-access location, technologies and solutions like that to public safety. The intent of FirstNet is a single national public safety broadband network to meet the requirements and objectives of our first responders. It's not a network of networks. And when you introduce additional networks, you start to fragment the intent of the process. While I applaud what the state is doing, and they absolutely should be doing their diligence and evaluating all options and looking at what does opt-out mean, our intent is to bring a single platform that we are committed to for minimally 25 years, are committed $40 billion, a common platform to innovate against. We're at day zero of a 25-year obligation to this commitment. So what it looks like today, although very powerful in nature, is going to have an evolution arc that is going to be significant. So the technologies, the innovation that we're going to bring to you is also going to be significant. And a lot of that is going to be accomplished through continued collaboration with our public safety partners in order to ensure that we continue to understand what your requirements and objectives are. One other thing I'll share real quickly is ours is an all-band solution, right? And not only do you receive priority, preemption, and quality of service on our macro network, but you also have access to that on our DAS system. So where we have a DAS system at Mile High, first responders that are responding to an incident at that location will have the same priority access on that in-building system and that infrastructure in the way that they do on our macro network. So that's significant in and of itself. The NTIA funding in an opt-out scenario, $71 to $88 million is a significant amount of money. To put that in perspective, beyond our existing infrastructure that's already in place in Colorado, in the last 3 years alone, AT&T has put $538 million, over $500 million into the AT&T network in Colorado in just the last 3 years alone. So when you put into context, while there will be a private partner in an opt-out scenario, right, bringing their own assets to bear and their own funding, we have significant infrastructure in place. We've already made significant funding commitments over well before the last 3 years, but just in the last 3 years alone. And then we also leverage, from an economies of scale standpoint, our entire 138 million subscribers nationwide to bring price points to you from a device standpoint at the most hyper-aggressive price component possible. And the ability to leverage that is significant in the way that we'll continue to deliver and get even more cost competitive on our rate plans and continue to deliver equipment services to you and solution sets as cost competitive as humanly possible. So I just wanted to share that.
And Marcos, correct me if we're up to 26 states that have opted in. 27. 27 most recently, Indiana, Pennsylvania.
And Texas was recent.
And then Alabama as well.
Yes, I'm having trouble keeping track which one. That's right. I'm dedicated to the Rocky Mountain region. So yeah. What's important to me, and keep in mind this, I want the state of Colorado to do what's in the best interest of the state of Colorado. I live in this state. I'm raising my family in this state. My name and reputation go with everything that I do. So as I work with you, you know that that's my commitment to you, right? You get me as a representative and a conduit to FirstNet leadership within the state of Colorado. But ultimately, what's most important to me is that public safety in the state of Colorado has the best network available to them possible so that they can be in service to their communities and ultimately in service to my family. Sure. And I look to be back in service to you in that same manner. So my commitment to you is that I fully believe that the AT&T FirstNet solution is that solution for you. It's up to the state and the governor and the governance board to make their recommendations and determine where we go from there.
Yeah, I also think it's important, though, our surrounding states, Wyoming, Nebraska just opted in, So, I mean, that's important for us to know as well.
Well, again, technically, it won't matter for interoperability. It doesn't matter, if we opt in or opt out in terms of interoperability with the states around us. It doesn't matter. Sorry.
We spent a lot of time talking about coverage, technology, things like that. What does the governance look like in both models? I can understand in an opt-out model, it's going to be a little bit more locally controlled since the state's going to control it. But what does it look like in an opt-in scenario? Right now, I don't have any coverage at my house. I can go down to Verizon or AT&T and tell them that. It's like, what does it look like? We have control. PPRCN exists because we have local control over what we do. What is it? What will it look like? In an opt-in situation when we say the coverage sucks here.
Yeah, basically the governance in an opt-in situation, the governance is at the federal level. So FirstNet is an independent authority of the Department of Commerce. So they are a federal entity. They have the governance because they have the contractual relationship with AT&T, so the governance lies there. So basically the governance of the system will be out of our hands. We can, to your point, we can go scream and yell and say, dang it, they didn't do this here. But in terms of actually enforcing change, FirstNet will be the one that has the ability to enforce change. At the local level and state level, we won't have any kind of ability to enforce change.
The state also doesn't have that formal, just because the RFP, the contract is between FirstNet and AT&T. There is, however, some mechanisms in place. For example, my job switches to customer service. So I will still be here working to be your voice, working with Brian, working with agencies of what's going on down at the ground. We also have a Public Safety Advisory Council, which is members of disciplines from throughout public safety across the country. It's 40 members that they're advising FirstNet leadership, saying, hey, here's what's going on in our area, whether it's emergency management, EMS, fire, police, tribal, extensive coverage there. There's also congressional oversight. Congress made this law, said public safety needs this, by public safety, for public safety, how are you doing? So frequently our leadership is going before Congress and they're asking those tough questions of what's going on. There's a lot of oversight of FirstNet. There's also, we have a board. It's very unique from a government agency. We have an outside board that's made up of industry experts, federal positions, and public safety professionals. All of these people are saying, how's it going, to be dedicated, passionate about making this work. So although there isn't that formal, the state doesn't have that control that they would in an opt-out perhaps. There's a lot of oversight going on.
So I'll just follow that up.
Okay.
I'm also the deputy chief of a small fire department in the foothills, and nobody's got coverage where I'm at. So, we still have a paging network, and I could be sitting, outside the scene waiting to get clearance to go in, and I won't get an update on here. I've got active 911 here, but it won't work. So I got to wait till it comes over here or over here. So if we were to opt in, today, tomorrow, whatever, I know there's no coverage there. What recourse would I have to say I can't use the network because it doesn't work?
So your voice is going to, if you're not going to have it, the entire every square foot of the state will not receive coverage.
Yep.
But we have to take that first step to get there. So it's that understanding where those gaps are. Right now, the board is looking at all of the information that they receive from people like you saying, we don't have this coverage, and putting that together on that list, okay? So in the future, it'll be more of that same, working with AT&T and say, we don't have any subscribers over here, what's going on? And so it is that continued collaboration.
I just have more familiarity on the state side of things because I'm part of the governance body for the LMR system. Okay. So I know a little bit more of what goes on. This is more of a, to me, it's just more of a black hole because I don't understand. Right. That's all. I'm sure there's a mechanism. I just don't know it.
But Don, as a member of the governance, did you want to?
Yeah, I think the way the governance board is looking at it is that, and Brian showed the list of areas that we went out to, because there's representation on the board from all disciplines, from county sheriffs, from chiefs of police, from fire chiefs. All of those are represented on the board itself. And one of the things that we came up with is we know there are gaps, we know there are holes. So we put a list together that Brian showed you, and there'll be more lists because once they turn it on. But if we opt in, AT&T says, well, we're gonna come in and we're gonna put additional towers basically where you tell us to put them in. So in your area, if that's one of the ones that's already identified or will be identified, there could be a tower going in there, not necessarily where AT&T is gonna make money on it because it's not a populated area, but it's because the state of Colorado identified that as one of the holes that they're gonna fix within the next 5 years or so. So it isn't one of those ones where once a decision's made, then we're done. I mean, and I don't think AT&T is gonna be done. They're contracted for 25 years and we're only talking the first 5-year chunk of what they're gonna do. So I think as a board, what we looked at and what we did, I think we did diligence and say, hey, you got a lot of holes in Colorado, whether you're AT&T, Verizon, or whoever. And it's going to be a long-term project to fix all of those. But I think it behooves people that are having problems to let the board know, let your representative know as we go through once a decision is made, because then we need to tell AT&T or whoever our vendor is that there's still a hole there and we need a solution. I mean, because there is no perfect magic company right now.
And what Don just shared is significant, right? Whether it's AT&T or whether it's the state, your voice is important and your voice does matter because you're going to have a mechanism to communicate, hey, we need coverage here. And if the state tells AT&T through this collaboration, it's important for us to have a tower in Hinsdale, right? Like your community, which has no cell coverage whatsoever, we are committed to building out there because we are making commitments at the state level to say we have X number of new site allocations available to the state. Help us understand where it makes the most sense to serve public safety throughout the state of Colorado. And that's just through the first 5 years, right? Because to Don's point, we can't reasonably build out a plan beyond 5 years because we don't, and to Brian's earlier point, we don't know what technology is going to look like 5 years from now. And there may be much more effective ways, and likely will be, to accomplish the same thing 5 years from now than there is today. So we're committed. The state is committed. I know that with all my heart. But your smaller rural voices carry just as much weight as the large population centers within the state, because this is a network that's meant to meet all public safety.
And I think one of the board members that we have, Chief Dave in Yuma County, is he's got terrible coverage. I mean, he's a secondary user. He's not on any of the big networks. He carries multiple phones, and he's representing, he very much letting known, and it's not just for FirstNet, it's not just for AT&T, but it's all of the vendors. We gave them a map and said, this is how we want Colorado coverage. You tell us how you're going to fix that.
And what you're asking is really, it's the crux that I'm going to start this really, really what we're looking at is, again, the technology is the technology. It's not going to be any different. What we're looking at is really, it's a business model. And, historically in public safety, we have basically built very siloed, very proprietary, self-funded communication networks. We put our arms around them, whether we're the state or a county or a town, and we go and we ask our taxpayers for the money to build it, and then we operate it, and we maintain it, and we do everything for it, and we close it off. That business model is not going to be anymore. The technology changed too fast, it's too expensive, and it's really, whereas, what we've seen as ratio is really 5 to 6. So for every one LMR tower, we need 5 or 6 cell towers. So right there, you're talking about an increase in cost. So that model's not going to work. With the national plan with AT&T, what we basically said was, okay, another model is to basically say, okay, the commercial side of things, look at the commercial side and, really partner with them and let the commercial side drive that. And focus and see if we can create some competition and increase this, through a unique arrangement. What we're doing at the state with the opt-out potentially is to say, okay, is there a middle ground? Is there something different? Because you're right, in terms of direct voice and an opt-in, that voice then has to get funneled up to the federal level. Texas will have their voice funded. Florida will have their voice funded. So, I'll be honest, that is a concern. When we talk about, and I've raised that to FirstNet several times, in 5 years, when we're looking at, we say, okay, there's $200 million going back into the network, okay, in 5 years. 50 states are going to want that $200 million. And when it gets down to it, I'm not naive. Colorado probably doesn't have as big of a voice as New York and California and Texas. So it's one of the things we're looking at. Okay, long term, is our voice going to be heard the same as all the other 50 states? I don't know. So what we're looking at in the opt-out really is just a different business model to say, is there a different business model that would allow us to have a little bit more control? Now, would there be more risk? Absolutely. I mean, really, when you think any business arrangement, control and risk go hand in hand. If you want to control everything, you have more risk. If you're willing to give up risk, you're going to have to give up control. And so really that's all we're doing is trying to figure out, is there a middle ground between the way we've done things that is not sustainable anymore, this potential way over here with the commercial side, is there somewhere in the middle? That's really what it comes to get down to, is all we're trying to figure out with the opt-out scenario. And at the end of the day, it's all it really is. Good. You had a question?
Yeah, I was wondering about hardware, software costs, whether or not the state's going to push down costs to the locals. And then when you're talking about utilizing all of the towers as infrastructure, what happens? So then the commercial towers, like the cell phone towers, at least the AT&T ones, would then become part of our critical infrastructure that we would need to mitigate, protect, and provide does this power supply for that kind of the costs associated with that?
Yeah, so 2 points. So the cost of the hardware and the software, neither an opt-in, there will be costs, and that's why, the idea that there's no cost to an agency that if we opt in, that's false. There will be a cost. Just like if you're an AT&T customer right now and you switch to Verizon, there's a cost because you have to go touch all your units to change things out. If you switch to T-Mobile, there's a cost. So the cost of transferring your end user devices, your modems, your phone, that type of thing, will be there in an opt-in or opt-out scenario. So if we
I'm not talking about modems and phones. I'm talking about like hardware, software applications, stuff like that.
Well, you mean applications from like CAD, like that, or what kind of applications are you talking about?
I guess we don't know, right?
Yeah. So again, in either scenario, any modifications that are required at the local level, whether you change out some software, which is unlikely. Again, if you're using data today, on the network, whether it's for instance Mobile, Verizon, Vero, that application will work on FirstNet, whether we opt in or we opt out. So applications, the applications will work. All the applications need is a network, and they provide a network. People provide networks. Now, is there going to be some hardware costs? Yes, at the local level in either scenario. That's where if we opt in, you sit down with Marcos and say, okay, here's what we have, here's our fleet, here's things we have to look at. What are the costs? The things we have to change. That would be the exact same in an opt-out scenario. There might be some things. If you've recently upgraded all your modems and stuff, they probably will work. But the application, no. The application costs will be specific to your jurisdiction based on what your applications look like. I would say most of your applications, if not all, you won't need to change out any applications to switch to either network because an application just needs network connectivity.
Okay, so if later on we're able to use a cell phone to access the radios, there won't be any application that we would need to add to our phone that might end up costing the local.
That either way. So if you're not using that technology right now, if you're not using that technology where you can have an app on your cell phone that interfaces with the LMR network, yes, there is going to be a cost to utilize that to your agency in either scenario, opting in or opting out.
If the state opts in, will that ultimately become a requirement if they go well?
No, there's no requirement. There's no requirements on this, whether we opt in or we opt out. There are no requirements on any jurisdiction to use the network. There are no requirements on any local jurisdiction to change out software from the state. So there are no mandates or requirements whatsoever on local jurisdictions to use this network at all.
Okay. The other parts were the pass down and the tower protection.
Yeah. So the tower question, I'm glad you brought that up. So that is one of the other issues that we're looking at when we look at opting in, opting out. And again, if you look at what we've done things, every single DTRS tower has 8-hour battery backup and alternative fuel generator. Every single one of those can operate probably for at least a week without power. Most cellular networks have 4-hour battery backup in most of their cell phones. So there's a difference there between hardware. Now, in a cellular network, you don't need that extended support, that hardening every single site. So if you lose a site in downtown Denver, there's enough sites to fill in. You might see a little bit of degradation, but not much. If you lose with one site on I-70 that's covering a 15-mile, chunk of I-70, that's bad. So that's one of the things that we're looking at is that the other factor. We've talked with AT&T about hardening. What AT&T has said is we will look at the sites and work with you to figure out what sites need hardening. There's been no commitment in terms of what hardening looks like yet, if I'm not.
Well, keep in mind, we already harden our sites significantly. There's different definitions of what hardening really means, and the way that the state hardens an LMR site is different than the approach that we take. Because simply, if you take down that LMR tower, you lose that coverage for that entire sector. Whereas we have redundant capabilities because of the number of towers and overlay on our cellular network that are more preventative than what happens in that sort of scenario. But we do have a whole national disaster recovery, a fleet that doesn't just support in times of crisis, but is also there for a tower maintenance standpoint, et cetera. So we have 700 assets in that fleet that all of the time is deployed to, work on towers that are incurring issues at a level where maybe capacity or coverage is being impacted.
So to answer your question, any hardening costs that are not bid scenario, any hardening costs would be, that would be what AT&T would say, okay, if you said we gotta have this tower hardened, we gotta have a backup generator at this tower because it's the only tower around. That would be.
In some towers, we have permanent generators, and we have an entire fleet of mobile generators. So, we have obviously mechanisms and protocols to address that.
So in an opt-out scenario, that's part of our bid. So, okay, you need to tell us what sites you would harden. To Marcus's point, you don't need to harden every site. We feel like you do need to harden some sites. So that would be part of the bid. Honestly, any public asset that's utilized, I would likely bet is probably hardened more. So if AT&T came in and said, we want to use your tower is probably hardened to a higher level than what they are currently do because we just had different standards. So from a hardening perspective, I don't foresee any cost being borne to the local agency to harden the site. So when you look at this, the goal of the effort, again, and I'll get around that scenario, is to essentially say, we're using a technology right now. Okay, everyone uses cell technology for cell phones and data. It doesn't quite meet our needs, all right? Because it gets congested, it goes down sometimes, that kind of thing. Can we uplift the technology to meet our needs better, okay? Can we do prioritization and preemption? Can we make sure it has been encouraged? The things we're used to doing also. So the goal is to say, let's uplift the core network to a point where we say it's better than what we have right now. Is it going to be ideal? Are we going to get 100% coverage? Is every site going to be hardened to critical standards? No. So, but so here's where we're at. Here's an ideal world. Where can we get to in there? So that's the core network, what we're doing. Now, from an agency perspective, again, as the technology changes, the decision on you as an agency to adopt technology or not to adopt technology will always be your decision. So to take what you have right now, and if we opt in or opt out, take what you have right now and transition it to either an opt-in or opt-out scenario, there will be some costs. Those costs will be dependent upon agency by agency. Now, will there be future costs that are mandated on that in either scenario? No. Now, will their technology advance in either an opt-in or opt-out scenario? Will there be some really cool stuff that your folks come to you and say, hey, we really want to do this now, this is awesome. Oh, yeah, by the way, it's going to cost $10 a month extra because it's an additional service, or we need new devices to do this. That is really what you're seeing the cost, is that as you increase the level of technology and you increase what is utilized, yes, your folks are probably going to come to you and say, this is really cool, we really want this. As with any technology, there's always an additional cost. The more you want, the more it's going to cost. That's just a factor of it. That's not going to change an opt-in or an opt-out scenario. Additional questions?
I got more of a technology question,
yeah.
and you might have mentioned it when I was gone, and I apologize. But so the preemption and the priority, is that event-driven, or is that on every public safety device?
So when you're on the FirstNet network, right, you're on our FirstNet core, you'll have, on a daily operational basis, priority access to the network resources all day long, every day. So your end user experience, primary end users, yeah, sorry. So your daily end user experience will always be better operationally all the time. In the event of an incident, a crisis, right, the network starts to become congested, you still will have that priority access, but when necessary, preemption will kick in, and it will relocate or remove non-mission critical primary users off the network or down the chain of prioritization in order to ensure the parameters, the quality of service and priority parameters that are in place to ensure that public safety and first responders have access to the network that they need. So they will never be throttled or congested because if necessary, we'll move our commercial traffic completely off the network to ensure that the capacity is there for first responders.
So what drives that? You know, a phone call, a text?
No, it's inherent. So it's inherent in the FirstNet service, and it's driven by your association with SOC codes and SIM chips, and how the intelligence in the FirstNet core identifies that you're a FirstNet end user.
So basically, within the standards, there's a prioritization. There's 0 through 9. 0 being the highest and 9 being the lowest. When you're based on your IMEI and your device, first responders essentially will be giving always a 0. So that means at any point, and the network manages that. So when the network senses, I'm getting overloaded, what Margaret said, what it'll do is it'll go to the 9s first and say, okay, 9, you're off, you're done. Then 8s, you're off, you're done. So public safety will always be a 0. So the primary users will, so it just, the network itself can basically self-monitor it, and so 0 will never get booted off. So you will always have the capacity in prioritization and preemption. Now, a well-maintained network, the preemption probably won't, preemption is really once in a blue moon, a well-balanced network, because you can also do applications. So you can say, okay, in an incident, I'm going to prioritize my immediate CAD application, because that's how I'm over, maybe a secondary app that my, PIO uses to do something, so you can actually get in there as well and say, okay, not only do we need to adjust who's on the network, but the network can basically say, we need to boot, these applications are going to get moved down, or I'm going to cut off this application, because it's really not, from your perspective, you would work with AT&T and say, okay, here's my critical application, my most critical application and my least critical application. So you also have the ability to get in there and say, again, in an incident, get the ability to say, you know what, we really don't need this application right now, cut it out. So that would expand more capacity. So maybe so you would have more capacity in the network for the users that you need. So, but again, all of that's done dynamically. That's part of the 3GPP standard, that it allows you to do that through a program. Now, it takes a lot of upfront thought. So that's where, in an opt-in or an opt-out scenario, you would need to sit down with the network operator, AT&T or whoever would be that, and really think that through. So that's one of the things we realized when we did the Vail demonstration with this, is the amount of upfront thought you need to manage these applications is significant. That, because you're talking about situational awareness and these applications missing this, what groups you have. With this new technology, you need to put a lot more upfront thought into what is important versus what is not important, and how to kind of preload some of the situations that you think about you might have in the future. It makes the technology function a lot better. So, yeah.
And to that point, specific to the forethought necessary to stand up this type of network, we stood up a brand new care team, 24/7 by 365 technical support just for FirstNet. We have 8 global SOCs, which are security operations centers that monitor over 100 petabytes of traffic on a daily basis. We stood up a new SOC just for FirstNet. So we put a tremendous amount of thought into what the requirements will be of first responders specific to this network. That's why, to Brian's point, we come in and we customize and tailor the solution specific to your operational requirements. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. So from application prioritization to handset mix to rate plan mix to profiles of your agency within the dedicated customer care team, so that they know what your mix of device and rate plans are and what your technical requirements are. We put all of that thoughtfulness in up front. But I'll come back to this again. We're at day 0 of a 25-year commitment. So while it's incredibly well thought out now, and it's going to be very robust in nature, it's going to evolve and continue to get better and more significant as we move forward through time.
The management of the technology is going to get more complicated. Again, it's opt-in, opt-out. It's just, it has nothing to do with the network. It's the technology. So the technology that you're seeing is going to complicate things much more significantly than your traditional ML radio, because it's much more complicated technology. If you think about it, ML radio, you can push a button to talk. Okay. With this technology, it's limitless to what you can do. Again, that's going to be your choice, but it will get more complicated from the management side. That's what we're seeing, especially a lot in the urban areas. You're basically seeing jurisdictions essentially turn this over to their IT departments because they say we can't keep up with this stuff. It's moving so fast. But again, it's your choice. You're going to have the choice to say, hey, I want to adopt situational awareness. Okay, that's going to require a lot of thought and a lot of pre-planning. It's going to be your choice. Are there some significant benefits of situational awareness? Absolutely. Are there some costs to implement that technology? Yeah, there's costs to implement any technology. So the technology we're talking about, all this cool stuff that you can do, it's going to get more complicated.
So, talking about cost. So, you talked about competitiveness and the business that you're in is very competitive. Is there an extra cost associated with this, or is it, if I, as a first responder entity, choose AT&T, am I going to have the same rate that I would have had if I was a normal commercial business, or is there going to be some sort of an added fee to help pay for all of this extra?
No additional added fees. We've created FirstNet specific rate plans that were developed specifically to be at or below what you're paying today out in the market, driven by market forces. So there's primary and extended primaries. So there's two components to what your ultimate end user cost structure will be. But first responder primary end users, we baked in all of the services into that rate plan. There's no additional fees associated with that. As you layer on additional applications, right, enhanced push to talk, to use that with LMR interoperability, there'll be an additional cost associated with that. So it's on a case-by-case basis from the standpoint of how are you layering on applications and innovation to ultimately achieve what you're trying to achieve. But fundamentally, from a rate plan standpoint, you'll have the full feature set available of quality of service, priority, and preemption on the FirstNet network in your standard rate plan.
Have you guys, I just want to say this one, have you guys, when mission critical push to talk is implemented in the standard, will that be part of the standard, or will mission critical push to talk services, basic push to talk services, will that be extra? Will that be one of the additional services? Or have you guys not figured that out?
I don't have the answer to that.
Okay. Yeah. No, I just thought about talking about that. Yeah.
So now that I understand how the preemptive part works a little bit better, when I think of the events that we've had in Colorado that would have drove us to need that, the Boulder floods, maybe some of our larger, Waldo Canyon, Black Forest, where you have large numbers of people evacuating and trying to call their loved ones out of state and whatnot. Those types of events require us to use partners from other states. And so when you look at the Junkins fire, and we brought in an incident management team that was primarily out of Utah and Idaho. And so if those states opt in, and a lot of those responders opt in and go with AT&T, right, and they come to Colorado, and we chose to opt out, and hypothetically we used Verizon as our backbone for our FirstNet system. Those folks aren't going to have that preemption in Colorado because they went with what the states that opted in. I think I think of our USAR team that went to Florida, in Texas. If those states opted out and we opted in, are their phones going to work in those states?
Yes. So as I mentioned, opting in and opting out has no impact on the ability to utilize the network required dish preemption. That's the FCC stuff I told you about. That's what the FCC has said. The law basically says the state that opts out must be interoperable with the nationwide network.
Because regardless, it's your FirstNet core.
Yeah.
So if you opt out, you're building the towers that has to connect to the FirstNet core, so it's the same user experience nationwide.
Yeah. Okay, so if people have an AT&T phone and they come here and say Colorado went with Verizon, their AT&T phone is going to work for FirstNet preemption in Colorado if we opt out.
So that EPC core,
okay.
so there's several functions of that, what we become the EPC. One's called the, policy, it's called PCRF, basically the policies, and one's called the HSN, it's basically the users. So that core basically says, are you a public safety user? Yes or no? And then it says, okay, what are the policies associated with this public safety user? What is are you a 0, are you a 1, are you a 2? So that core determines when you log on to the network, that core sets those policies for you as a user. So, yeah, so that core is going to manage that. So even if we opt out, we still have to interface with that core. So that core will still authenticate users and put those same policies. So if someone from Florida that opts in comes in here, and if we opt out, that national core will still authenticate them, and they will still have that prioritization.
But if you as an end agency are using Verizon, you won't interoperate with that core. The state is not going to utilize in an opt-out scenario Verizon. Verizon didn't bid on the national contract, and to my understanding, they didn't bid on the hypothetically, yeah. But if you're a Verizon end user in that scenario, you're not going to interoperate or be tied back to that FirstNet core.
Yeah.
In the same way, if the state provider would or be tied into the core in an opt-out scenario.
So the issue you're talking about though, so let's say we opt in, and let's say there's an agency in New Mexico opted in. Let's say there's an agency in New Mexico that says, you know what, like this whole FirstNet thing, we're going to T-Mobile. Now, if those guys come up here to help us out, and they're just using T-Mobile, and we opt in, and they come up, then there will be issues. We won't have that.
They're not going to be on the network.
And that's the same thing, if the state opts in and if Pueblo decides, okay, we're still gonna use whatever we're using, then it's not gonna work anywhere.
No, and that's a good point. We are still going to have issues, no matter what, whether we opt in, whether we opt out, whether California opts in or opts out, we are still gonna have issues because you are still gonna have people on FirstNet, AT&T, you are still gonna have people on Verizon, you are still gonna have people on T-Mobile, you're still gonna have people on Southern Link in Alabama, in that area. And so, not everyone is going to use this network. And so, yeah, we still are going to have issues that someone's going to come in and say, hey, I want to use my phone in this. And you're going to say, not, sorry, you can't.
Which is why the contract has adoption targets so that they have to earn their business. And then talked about how public safety lobbied Congress to come to Core 4, and a couple of them are on our board, and they're just passionate that public safety it'll grow. And as it turns over, you have to have the network to have that option.
And to the point, we're still going to have, even if we opt in, so let's say we opt in and you guys both use AT&T FirstNet, but you're using one app and he's using a different app, we're still going to have issues that, you might have some functionality in your app that he doesn't have in his app, and you're going to have to, oh, crap, oh, you can't, oh, okay. So, this is not going to solve, this is not a silver bullet for the interoperability issue. We are still going to have interoperability issues, and the only way to solve that is to mandate that every single person use a given network that is a proprietary network.
Can I suggest that we are going to have a training at West Metro on November 6th, and what it is, it's an LTE overview training. And basically, we have our engineers, they actually go through all the specifics of how this technology differs from land mobile radio that we're using now and LTE. And you can get some of your real specific LTE questions about how it signs on to the eNote B and all the, he puts up a graph. There's a whole lot of stuff that goes on. So that's November 6th, 9 to 12, West Metro, at 433 South Allison Parkway, or you can go on and you can sign up and you can view it on the web. You can do it that way as well.
Is that different? I was here probably last year in this room where we had a technical. Is it different from that?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to check. I think it is different, and there are enough really good updates because of what we already know about the partner and what FirstNet's doing in this evolution. I think it's gonna be well worth your time.
And that presentation has nothing to do with opting in, opting out. It truly is. Here is LTE technology. The guy that does it used to actually run the R&D labs up in Boulder. He's an incredibly intelligent person and does a really good job at breaking down the technology so you understand what the technology we're talking about really is. So it's an excellent resource. Additional questions? Thank you guys for your time. You guys have some great questions.
Nice job.
Oh, thank you very much. please, feel free to contact us. Like I said, get on the private portal. I can't encourage you enough to get on the private portal. It's got much more detailed information. To do that, just email Ed, myself, Sarah, Kim, anyone. We'll get that to you. It takes a day or two. And, you know, if you have more questions, please touch with me, Don, anyone else in the governing body. That's what we're here for. So, thank you guys.